Now this is a balm, and no one can tell me otherwise. Apparently there are some people who might call it a cob or a bap or a batch, a stotty. What makes sense in one place clearly doesn't always necessarily make sense in another. So,
what does Everton Football Club mean to you?
Everything.
What I've said as part of the defence investment plan was that I want through it to give all of our community something down.
I'm going to pull a pint for you here.
You and I need to re-industrialise to make sure that jobs here are available.
Very first.
The UK has a new Prime Minister and he is just so gosh darn normal and relatable.
Hiya, I'm Andy Burnham, and what I'm doing right now, I'm just making a cup of tea. I do loads of really normal things throughout the day, and having a cup of tea is just one of them.
You know, he even has a favourite Greggs, and isn't that cute? But amongst all the TikToks and the Twitter posts and the discussions about Greggs and Baps,
this is a balm, and no one can tell me otherwise.
What exactly are the politics of this normal, Cambridge-educated bloke? Well, if his interviews are to be believed, it's about hope, about making things better for people all around the country, about fixing the accumulation of power in Westminster and fixing the ignored regions of the country.
Bring back hope, bring back a sense of possibility to the country, that things aren't in a inevitable decline and that your place isn't shut out of having some good things happen.
Which in practice means something. Probably something good. He apparently wants to end 40 years of neoliberalism, which is great. Manchesterism, Burnham says, is the end of neoliberalism.
Working side by side with business, we've built the country's fastest growing economy. Manchesterism is the end of neoliberalism.
Wait a second. What did he say there?
Working side by side with business.
Well, that doesn't sound that much like ending neoliberalism. In fact, it sounds quite consistent with Tony Blair's vision of New Labour.
No more bosses versus workers. We are on the same side, the same team, and Britain United will win.
What's going on? He's supposed to be a normal bloke who likes Greggs and gravy and calling your mum on a Sunday afternoon or some shit like that.
Hey, it's Andy Burnham here. I'm just about to make some toast, with white bread of course. I wouldn't even know how to spell sourdough and wouldn't be interested in it, because it's not normal enough.
I don't know, maybe I'm being too judgy. He is just an ordinary bloke after all, and just because he was a former ordinary bloke in Tony Blair and Gordon Brown's cabinets doesn't mean that we shouldn't trust that he'll end neoliberalism. You know, maybe he's changed. And, you know, indeed he talks about Manchesterism as the model for ending neoliberalism, and lots of people in the media have been telling us that this is something new and something exciting. So what is the story of Manchesterism then, Burnham's pet project? To see if it would end neoliberalism, I took a wee look and see if I could find its sort of rotten carcass. But, you know, in a shocking turn, what I actually found was that in Manchesterism, neoliberalism at the municipal level isn't dead, but it seems to be thriving. Mr. Normal Bloke really did work side by side with businesses. Well, he worked side by side with some businesses, as the London Review of Books reports that between 2015 and 2024, nearly £1 billion of public money was lent on favourable terms to developers who built almost no affordable housing, almost 2/3 of it to one company. In fact, the logic underpinning Manchesterism seems to be, according to local tenant organiser and writer Isaac Rose, that the actually existing Manchester model has been to use the state to de-risk profitability for a particular kind of rentier capitalism. A core feature of neoliberalism has always been using state forces to create and uphold markets for private capital accumulation. Under Tony Blair's progressive neoliberalism, of which our normal bloke was a part, the use of public-private partnerships, or PPPs, exploded. And for anyone who doesn't know, a public-private partnership is essentially a way for the state to funnel money into private hands, often for infrastructure projects like schools and hospitals, and essentially to de-risk large projects for capital. And de-risking is maybe the wrong framing, because the risk still exists, but it's absorbed by the state and ultimately by the public and not by the corporations or capital. I still remember my modern studies teacher, Mrs. Rogers, who's a formative figure in my life, and one of the reasons I do this stupid job, she described to us the use of PPP contracts, which was used to build Edinburgh's Royal Infirmary. The state provided funds and contracts to private companies to build the hospital, and then when it was completed, the state rented the hospital off of the company until the cost had been totally covered, totally returned to the corporation. And you might think that at that point the state has totally paid off the hospital, that it would default back into state hands. You'd think that they'd bought it. You'd be wrong. Instead, the state then has to renegotiate the contract and continue to rent the hospital off of the private contractor.
Liar, Lanley. And I come before you good people tonight with an idea.
It's an absurd system, well suited to neoliberal logics, and indeed you can see clear elements of it throughout Manchesterism. Rose specifically points to the system of housing investment in Manchester, where the local authority invested £938 million in loans into Manchester's property sector. 2/3 were invested within the Manchester City Council area, while more than half of that amount, over £500 million, was lent to Reniker alone. None of the housing delivered by Reniker has been affordable. Across the near 11,000 units supported by the HIF, only 503, under 5%, have been classed as affordable. This has been one of the principal financial aids to the bombardment of Manchester over the last decade. The role this local authority fund plays in de-risking private development and rent seeking continues. This month, the fund approved a loan of £50 million to Salboy, a developer co-founded by Betfred billionaire Fred Dunn, to ease their plans for a 246-metre tall skyscraper. The ripple effect of all of this development has been rising rents, up to 40% in Manchester in the last 3 years, and ultimately displacement from the inner city. So, I guess it's an ironic turn for a normal bloke who wants to fix regional inequality that the effects of Manchesterism's de-risking of private capital seems to have been a deeply uneven development, with the regional core seeing productivity gains and the picture for the rest of the city region far less rosy, and many of the productivity benefits have been captured by capital, not labour, absorbed by increasing rents. And increasing rents in the inner city has resulted in, of course, displacement, a mini concentration of power within both capital and the core municipal region.
So number 10 North can be that circuit breaker, taking power out of Whitehall into the rest of the country and supporting all places to have good growth in every postcode.
And as Rose argues, this doesn't look like the rotten corpse of neoliberalism, but instead represents a crystallisation of it. So far, it's not looking good for Hope and blokes. But Burnham has made re-industrialization of the North and other left-behind regions a centrepiece to his new agenda. And this surely must be where the decisive break from neoliberalism is. Clearly this can't refer to a mass return of manufacturing in general. The UK economy has deindustrialised faster than basically every other advanced economy. In 1948, the UK accounted for around 12% of global goods exports. By 2018, it accounted for 4% of goods and services combined. In place of manufacturing, services, including research and development, financial services, and professional and management consulting, have become central to UK trade, accounting for 56.2% of exports in 2023. And this gap between goods and the blurrily defined category of services is widening. Service exports rose by 73% between 2010 and 2024, while goods exports stagnated, making the UK the only G7 economy with a higher value of service exports than of goods. So to effectively reindustrialise the UK would take such a monumental shift in the entire structure of the economy, even if we weren't to consider the international costs of labour power and the massive capital expenditure that it would take to do so. But there are potential avenues of investment and development left, especially in the context of global climate catastrophe, the effects of which have plunged England into a sustained drought, turning parks into 1920s US-style dust bowls and making me dress like a slut. It's really hot. I can't cope.
Well, you're certainly doing your job today, Mr. Sun. Oh, rats.
I had to turn the fan off while I'm recording because it's too loud, and the window's closed, I'm in a sweatbox, it's horrible. But the climate catastrophe and the transition economy means that there is a renewed interest in investment in renewable energy, in public infrastructure like rail, in public house building and retrofitting existing properties for the age of climate catastrophe. And all of these sort of infrastructural projects might be able to inject some industrialisation and some job growth in regions across the country, although still likely would not be as much as we would hope given the paradigmatic restrictions of a capitalist transition. Basically, transition economy jobs aren't as labour intensive as we would hope, and we can't rely on the transition to re-industrialise any area. If we want to have more job growth or we want to better distribute labour in our society, it would take a much greater break from essentially capitalist economics. But that's not the topic of this video. Basically though, if you wanted to pursue what might be a kind of re-industrialisation, even if it was limited, probably a transition economy project would be where you want to go. Unfortunately, Burnham seems more committed to further drilling for North Sea oil instead.
Well, amidst that likely flurry of announcements, one of the things that BBC News has been told that Andy Burnham will announce is plans for renewed oil and gas drilling in the North Sea when he becomes Prime Minister on Monday.
And so far, after a Cobra meeting concerning the UK's heatwave, Burnham's only real solution to global climate catastrophe is banning disposable barbecues. Actually, it's not even banning them, it's asking shops not to sell them. Fucking inspired. Not very normal bloke of you, Andy. Not very normal bloke at all. For a clue as to why he's so committed to further oil extraction, beyond a stated aim to bring down energy prices, which won't happen with further extraction, I think we can look at a few things. Firstly, the planned massive increase in data centres, which requires huge amounts of energy. The UK still imports most of its oil and gas, but I can see the government seeking some energy security to sustain the doomed venture of AI data centre investments. Secondly, the power of fossil capital in general is just massive. Beyond just energy, fossil capital underpins our entire productive regime, which has allowed it, in the words of Tilstead and Newell, to serve the interests of capital in general, as opposed to a particular fraction of capital. This privileged role and hegemony is reflected in the political sphere by the fact that the petrochemical industry has the highest lobby costs in the EU. It's not hard to imagine that this powerful fraction of capital exerts a huge amount of pressure on Burnham's government. But finally, and related to the massive power played by the petrochemical industry, Burnham is obsessed with increasing military spending, a fossil fuel intensive and incredibly polluting industry which accounts for 40% of public sector emissions.
To keep our country safe.
Keeping the country safe.
Andy Burnham sounding similar to his predecessor and indeed talking about spending already planned by Keir Starmer. £8 billion to help replace the existing ageing class of nuclear submarines with 4 new dreadnoughts.
One of the first signs of the normal things to come with Burnham's government was his appointment of John Healey as Chancellor. Healey was previously Keir Starmer's Defence Secretary, but quit because he thought Starmer's planned defence spending increases weren't enough. And keep that in mind. Burnham then appointed former Health Secretary and possibly the most roundly hated man in the Labour Party, Wes Streeting, as Defence Secretary. Possibly because his image as a sort of haunted ventriloquist dummy would scare away any potential invaders. I wouldn't want to go in a house that had Wes Streeting in it. He's haunted. And Streeting has confirmed that defence spending will take priority over other areas of government spending under Burnham, which he said would make an enormous contribution to economic growth. And we'll return to the horrendous moral implications of this policy in a minute. But for now, let's take a look at the claim that defence spending will contribute to growth as a linchpin for re-industrialisation. So, in an analysis of Starmer's defence investment plan, which was set to double the UK's military budget, and remember, this wasn't enough for Burnham's Chancellor John Healey, in response to Starmer's proposal, the Transition Security Project argued that, far from re-industrialisation, this plan would result in around a 10,000 net reduction of jobs in the UK. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Firstly, Starmer's plan was to be funded by cutting spending in other areas like health, education and energy, and while Burnham has yet to indicate where he will get the money to fund increased defence spending, he has committed himself to maintaining Starmer's fiscal rules consistent with the neoliberal OBR watchdog. This, combined with Streeting's statement that defence spending will take priority over other areas of government spending, shows quite clearly that he will maintain Starmer's planned cuts in areas other than defence. The effects of such cuts will be a decline in growth in areas of the economy these departments relate to. Theoretically, according to the government, this decline would be more than offset by a defence dividend, which, even under the Starmer plan, was supposed to lead to growth and new jobs across the UK.
What I've said as part of the defence investment plan is that I want through it to give a commitment to all of our communities up and down the country. We do need to re-industrialise Britain, and to make sure the kind of jobs we have here are available in all parts of the country.
Unfortunately, as several analyses have shown, the defence dividend doesn't really exist in the UK. This is partly due to the fact that for decades, arms and military production has been reducing its human footprint. In contrast to the defence dividend that was meant to support new jobs and growth across the UK, the defence investment plan will lead to net job losses. This should not be surprising. Multipliers for military spending, which determine how many jobs are created per unit of spending, are often lower than multipliers for spending on health, care, education and many other public priorities. The increase in the Ministry of Defence budget announced in the Defence Investment Plan has a very small multiplier. It will only produce 2.4 jobs per £1 million of spending. By contrast, a conservative multiplier model for the capital budget of the departments facing cuts is much higher, at 9.9 jobs per £1 million. Thus, it should be no surprise to the government that partially funding £15 billion on military spending through cuts to other departments results in a net loss of jobs. Just one example of the continued austerity logic prevailing across other aspects of state expenditure is the continued crisis in UK higher education. One of the UK's few genuinely world-leading industries, and an industry which often sustains towns across the country. The university is often a linchpin for various towns, and their collapse would mean a collapse in local economies. Yet successive governments have presided over funding cuts, marketisation and neoliberalisation, and now departments are closing all over the place, with institutions themselves looking increasingly precarious. And Burnham has said nothing about this, but instead just wants to fund death, like a normal bloke. So the prospective impact of this defence-based reindustrialisation strategy may well be an overall loss of jobs. But worse than this, despite both Starmer and Burnham claiming that defence spending will rebalance the underserved regions, including ex-industrial towns in the north.
What I've said as part of the defence investment plan is that I want through it to give a commitment to all of our communities up and down the country.
Most defence contracts are concentrated in the south of England. Every aspect of this privileging of defence is counter to what Burnham claims will happen. It won't result in economic growth. Jobs won't return, they'll be lost. The regional imbalances won't be fixed, they'll be exacerbated. Like Burnham's Manchesterism, this isn't the death of neoliberalism, but its crystallisation. The government stepping in to funnel money into private hands under the guise of a regional rebalancing. However, unlike Manchesterism, Burnham's defence spending will have global impacts, as the UK's defence sector exports mass slaughter across the globe. Despite the claim that defence spending is required to fix systemic underfunding prior to these commitments from Starmer and Burnham, the UK's defence spending was amongst the highest in the world and exceeded its 1980 spending in real terms. We have never stopped playing a major role in global bloodshed, but it's a role which remains subordinate to US interests, and this is one reason why Burnham's defence spending is actually a boon to the US, with 85% of UK weapons coming from the US, and also in reaction to Trump's comments about, NATO allies having to keep up with spending obligations. Very clearly, this is deeply implicated with US hegemonic interests. It's more than just economic support for the US war machine. The UK has long actively participated in wars and coups to uphold US hegemony. Since 1945, the UK has been involved in planning or executing 42 coups to remove foreign governments across the global south, involving its intelligence agencies, covert and overt military interventions and assassinations, including Iran in 1953, the Congo in 1961, Oman in 1970, and Libya in 1996, amongst numerous others. The UK has supported the US in its post-9/11 wars, which killed 940,000 people in direct conflict and 3.6 to 3.8 million people through devastation of social and economic infrastructure. Notably, Burnham was in the cabinet during that time and supported these actions. Just because he's a normal bloke, just normal stuff. He probably liked Greg's then as well. The UK maintains a global network of military bases used extensively by the US, including in the latter's recent attacks on Iran. Moreover, while the UK imports 85% of its weapons from the US, it is the 6th largest exporter of arms in the world. Weapons made in British factories have been sold to Saudi Arabia for use against the Yemeni population, resulting in hundreds of thousands of deaths. They've been sent to Qatar and the UAE, where they have been used to conduct genocide in Sudan, and they've been sent to Israel, where they've been used to conduct a brutal genocide of Palestinians. Attempts to disrupt Israeli arms manufacturing in Britain has resulted in activists convicted under terror charges and given obscene and draconian sentences. But you know, Andy Burnham's favourite Greg's is a sausage bean melt or something, so isn't that cute? Maybe we should ask him what he calls a bread roll next. Please ignore all the blood dripping off his hands. It's not blood, it's gravy. He's just a normal gravy-loving bloke. What really gets me about this, the thing that made me write this script, is the bizarre way that Andy Burnham is being treated by the media and crucially by segments of the left as well. They're clapping like seals. It's infuriating. I remember when Starmer was vying for Labour leadership post-Corbyn, and a bunch of people claimed that he'd have just the same politics as Corbyn, but respectable like, in a suit. And I remember thinking that anyone taken in by that nonsense was just hopelessly naive. Maybe I could forgive it once, but it's happening again.
It is happening again.
Burnham flutters his fucking lashes and you fold. Everyone should know better than this. Burnham's not just an ordinary bloke, he's a neoliberal ghoul, a figure of the establishment, someone committed to maintaining the current order of things. His promotion of military spending at the expense of any climate goals, any actual nationalisation of any key industries, any disciplining of the power of capital, any redistribution of income from capital to labour, shows that for Burnham, Manchesterism is not a rejection of neoliberalism, but the increasing subordination of the UK state to the global death machine of the increasingly fascistic US fossil-fuelled hegemony. What our friend in the north is pushing is not a post-neoliberal rejuvenation, but Manchesterism, a neoliberal death machine.
Hello, thanks for watching. Forgive the voice, but I am slightly ill while I record this. If you've made it to the end of this video, thanks so much. This channel wouldn't survive without the support of everyone who watches these videos, engages with them, and people who support me via Patreon. $2 and up patrons get early access to videos, get access to all the scripts, $5 and up get access to a Discord, and $10 and up get their names read out in the credits. Once again, like, couldn't do this at all without that. Amazing support for just $2 a month at the lowest level. If you can't commit to a monthly recurring thing, I also have a PayPal and Ko-fi in the description. I'd like to just point out that a lot of the work that was done in this video is thanks to the Transition Security Project, who are a great project run by Commonwealth that you should all check out and look to support. Their work on redefining security in terms of the climate and their criticism of the military-industrial complex is really good. So I'd encourage you all to check out that project if you enjoyed this video. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Like I say, I'm quite ill, but this video made me kind of angry, and I will be looking to try and get some more out soon. Not sure what the next one will be on. I'm going to be away for a while, so hopefully I'll try and get something out soon. But anyway, thanks for watching this one, and I hope you enjoyed it. And once again, if you can sign up to Patreon, please do. If you can't, no worries. Liking and sharing is all that matters as well. So, and with that, I will just read out the names of the $10 and up patrons who get their names read out in the credits. So we've got Demon Squid, Soval Hayes, Anita Anispe, Bon, Cameron Blakemore, Daniel Swing, Earl Grey T, Ellis Wren, FD Signifier, Hey Joe, Joshua Moldenhauer, Catherine Helm, Katie Marshall, Kim Crawley, Necromantic, Nina G, Public Relations, S, Stephen Van Doren, unoriginal name, Violet, Beans, Agaghost, Aaron, Alex, Borderland Rice, Kids Ware, Christopher Poff, Daniel Hughes, Duncan Skinner, Esoteric Fictionalism, Eugene K, J. Fraser Cartwright, Jack, Jacob Quinn Schenker, Joel, John W, J.R. Barbera, Caspar Gunda Westberg Larson, Kieran Gore, Layum, Mason Colbert, Mark Gussie, Niels Abelgard, Patrick Mackey, Paul Singleton, Theo Westfall, Practical Woman, Rachel Ann, Rachel Mixon, Robin, Tamash Kispeter, TB Skyen, Tim, Tinfoil Pancakes, Tom Price, Xander Corvus, and I think that's it. That is it. Someone almost snuck in under the radar there, but you didn't get me. You didn't get me. Alright, that's it. Bye. Love you.